now we'll see where this goes. All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for September the 26th. We are already into week 4. The Seahawks beat the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football last night, 24-21. They hold off a furious comeback from Arizona, a furious comeback from Marvin Harrison Jr. based on how he started that game. And really, the Seahawks are able to do it on special teams. And we've talked a lot about the range of kickers and the new kickoff rules. They really only had to make one play on offense in the last minute of the game to set this up. Kind of interesting how this worked out. Chad Ryland comes up short of the landing zone. That gives the Seahawks advantageous field position. Sam Darnold hits Jaxson, Smith, and Jigba for 22 yards, and that really puts them in Jason Myers' field goal range. 52-yard field goal goes through. The Seahawks are now 3-1, just a half game behind the Niners for first place in the NFC West. All right, our first of 3 topics today. The big topic this week, both in New York and nationwide, I'd say, is the quarterback change that the New York Giants have decided on. They are going to Jaxson Dart. He will make his first NFL start on Sunday. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on how he got there. And this really goes back to the drafting of Jaxson Dart in the spring and how Russell Wilson had affected the quarterback room that Dart was entering into. They really felt like, over the course of April and May and June, Wilson had affected a lot of positive change in that quarterback room. There were a lot of questions, including from people like me, on what that was going to look like with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and now a rookie in that room. Well, Wilson was able to create a real positive environment in there, and they felt like he played well in the spring. So going into the summer, the decision was made. How do we give the team something it can build around? How do we give the team something to wrap its arms around as we get ready for what's going to be a really challenging start to our schedule? And this decision was made. Let's just go all in on Russell Wilson and see how this goes, and we'll continue to develop Jaxson Dart. So Russell Wilson's a starting quarterback at the start of camp, and Jaxson Dart keeps checking boxes. With how his physical skills are translating onto the field, with how he's picking up the offense, with how he's mixing with his teammates. Every box is getting checked. In fact, I'd say mid to late August, they would have felt comfortable starting him in week 1. Now, why didn't they start him in week 1? I think there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, it'd be much harder to go from Jaxson Dart back to Russell Wilson. And then so by giving Russell Wilson a shot out of the gate, you're not only keeping your word to Russell Wilson and your offense, you're also at least giving that a run. And then if it doesn't work out, it's pretty easy to go to Jaxson Dart. Number two, there's the environment that Jaxson Dart would be walking into. And piece of that is the availability of their left tackle, Andrew Thomas. He was not there week 1. He was not there week 2. He was out there in week 3. And now they feel like they've got the offensive line that they plan to have in place. It gives Jaxson Dart a better chance. It gives the whole offense a better chance. And Jaxson Dart has done everything that they have asked of him, everything that they wanted to see, they've seen. He played fast. The ball came out. Preseason, he stayed late to get extra work in over the course of the last few weeks. He worked on Tuesday, the player's day off, to get himself ready to go for his first NFL start. So everything you want to see from Jaxson Dart, we've seen so far. And now we'll see where this goes. Obviously, there are a lot of questions about Brian Daboll's job security, about Joe Schoen's job security. Now that Jaxson Dart is in there, so much of that will tie to Jaxson Dart's performance. And it doesn't mean that they have to be a playoff team, but it does mean that Jaxson Dart's got to prove to ownership that Schoen and Daboll made the right choice in identifying him and drafting him, and then that they're doing a good job developing him. So that's what you're going to be looking for. Jaxson Dart's thoroughly prepared for this moment. I've talked to people who were with him at Ole Miss. I've talked to people who have been around him who say he's much more prepared for the pros than maybe the reputation a Lane Kiffin quarterback coming from that spread offense would have. Lane Kiffin over the last few years went back to some of the old school West Coast stuff that he had done, back in his USC days. And so some of those old school West Coast principles were mixed into the offense, gets Jaxson Dart a little bit more pro ready. And you can see it in how fast he played in the summer. So they have the utmost confidence in Dart. If they didn't feel comfortable putting him in the game in the first place, they wouldn't have made him the backup. They made him the backup because they did feel comfortable with the idea that he if Russell Wilson were to get injured, he would be able to go into a game. And as for where you're looking for improvement, one of the main reasons that the Giants ran out of patience with Russell Wilson and why it was time to go to Jaxson Dart, not just for the good of the organization, but for the good of this specific team and these specific players, was how the team was performing and how Russell Wilson himself was performing on third down and in the red zone, those critical areas. On third down, to this point of the season, through 3 games, Russell Wilson is 15 to 31 for 193 yards, no touchdowns, a pick, a 54.9 rating, and just 9 first downs. So 9 first downs in 31 attempts. And then Russell Wilson in the red zone, he's 4 of 18 for 16 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, a 39.6 rating, and just 1 first down. So those 2 areas, again, as a team, they ranked 31st in both those categories. And Russell Wilson wasn't playing well. That's an area where they need to get better. So if you're talking about the macro, of course, they want to see their first round pick playing quarterback, and get a read on who he is as a player. But on the micro level, it's just about where this team is right now. Check out those third down numbers. Check out those red zone numbers. They'll tell you why this move was made now, and why 4 weeks in the season was the time for the Giants to push the button on the Jaxson Dart era. Our second topic for today, the biggest, and I hesitate to say biggest game of the weekend because I don't think it's the biggest game of the weekend. The biggest game of the weekend is probably the Eagles and the Buccaneers. But maybe the biggest stage of the weekend will be in Dallas. And that's because we have Micah Parsons going back to the scene of the proverbial crime where everything went wrong over the last couple of months, and where the divorce between Micah Parsons, one of the very best players in the NFL, and the team that drafted him, the Dallas Cowboys, happened. So what is this going to look like on Sunday for the Cowboys? It's a critical spot for the Cowboys. They come into this game at 1-2. They are a long field goal, long Brandon Arbery field goal away from being 0-3. The defense hasn't looked good. And now here come the Green Bay Packers. You don't have CeeDee Lamb in the lineup. You've had issues on the offensive line. And Micah Parsons is going to be on the other side. So what does this look like for the Cowboys? Well, I'm going to tell you why I think it's unfair to judge the Cowboys and how and the outcome of the Micah Parsons trade based on what we see on Sunday alone. This trade, the value of this trade, where the Cowboys are coming out of this year, where the Cowboys are going from here, like a lot of it's going to hinge on what they do with that 2026 first round pick, on what they do with that 2027 first round pick, on what sort of infusion of young talent to that roster happens over the course of the next few years. This was never a move about right now for the Cowboys. Yes, Kenny Clark helps them. Yes, Kenny Clark should give them and has given them something already on defense. Has the defense looked good the last couple of weeks? Absolutely not. But that trade was never about the here and the now for the Cowboys. It was about what does this look like over the next 4 or 5 years. Meanwhile, on the other side, we have a Green Bay defense that is playing at an exceptionally high level, And because they lost the game to the Browns on Sunday, doesn't mean that any of that has changed. They only allowed 13 points. There was a block kick at the end of that game. Like that loss to the Browns was not on the defense. So the pressure in this game, I actually don't think is on Micah Parsons. I actually think more so the pressure in this game is going to be on Jordan Love and the Packers offense to look a little bit better, because part of the reason you make the trade, and again, for the Packers, it's the reverse. This trade is about right now. Part of the reason you make that trade is because you feel like you've got a team and a quarterback that's ready to go. So what does Jordan Love look like having to bounce back from that loss to the Browns, that loss in ugly fashion in Cleveland? Is he able to take advantage of a Dallas defense that's that's looked very susceptible over the last couple of weeks in a building where he's had a lot of success? I'm intrigued to see that part of it too. So for the Cowboys, a lot of this is going to be, what does Micah Parsons look like against our offense? I think the bigger picture look at this game is, what do the Cowboys look like over the next couple of years? and putting all of it together. And in the here and the now, how does Jordan Love look having to bounce back from that game against the Browns last week? And finally, our third topic for today is the biggest game of the weekend, and we'll circle back with it. It's the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Both teams come in undefeated. I'm excited to see what this one looks like. The Bucs have some moving parts in offense. Mike Evans is injured. Micah has obviously stepped up in a big way. Chris Godwin, they're working him back. We'll see, what his availability will be. Tristan Wirfs, another question mark injury-wise. They had 3 starting offensive linemen out last week. But for the Buccaneers, this is a big one. They've had success over the last few years against the Eagles. Baker Mayfield's played really well through the first 3 weeks of the season. This could determine where a playoff game is held, down the line in January. So there's a ton on the line. I think, again, a lot of how this goes is going to come down to what a lot of Eagles games come down to, which is what's happening at the line of scrimmage. And so that Bucs offensive line that's been so beat up, that won't have Luka Decky, with Tristan Wirfs still a question. That Bucs offensive line, what does it look like going up against the Eagles defensive front? And then how does the Bucs defense do being able to slow down Saquon Barkley, putting the ball in Jalen Hurts in the passing game's hands a little bit more, and then being able to do a better job defending the pass than the Rams did last week. It'll be interesting to see. This is another one for the Eagles that could be a preview of what we see in January. Can't wait for that one. Also can't wait for a bunch of other matchups in week 4. And we will be there to recap all of it on Tuesday. We got more Breer reports coming for you next week, with one on Tuesday, mailbag in the middle of the week, another one next Friday. Be sure to check out all of that. And for right now, be sure to leave all of your comments for all of our Breer reports in the comments down below, or you can get to me on social media at Albert Breer on Twitter, at Albert R. Breer on Facebook, or Albert_Breer on Instagram. Appreciate you guys coming out.